Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Season 3, or rather Part 3 of Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. Obviously, for this, do know ahead of time, I'm going to jump right into spoilers. So if you have not seen all of Chilling Adventures of Sabrina Part 3, do not listen to this because I will spoil stuff for you. If you want to, you can watch all of Chilling Adventures of Sabrina Part 3 and come back and listen to this, but don't feel like you're obligated to. But nevertheless, like I said, jumping into spoilers, just kind of first of all, in my general thoughts, how I felt about this season. I thought this season was great. To me, it feels like this season's even darker than the previous two, which is, it's still tonally the same, but it just, I don't know, there was so much depth in this season, which, I mean, to be fair, there was quite a bit of depth in seasons 1 and 2, but it just, I don't know, it just seemed like this season just kind of felt like there were many like ups and downs, because it almost felt like hopeless, especially because like the Coven just kept losing their powers every chance they had an opportunity. Like, oh, we're about to have a leg up, and they lose it. Like, this was like the most like dashing, like depressing season in that regard. There was just a lot of stuff that went down. I was like, oh, that's depressing. Oh, that's even more depressing. It's just like all the stuff compounded upon itself, and it just seemed like every time it seemed like they took a step forward, they literally took like 3 or 4 steps back. So it just almost seemed like it was the most uphill battle they've ever had the entire series. So it seemed interesting, because obviously with the Coven losing their powers and everything, I was actually surprised to see the whole Nick situation resolved as quickly as I thought it would. I would have thought that probably would have been like, I mean, it wasn't 100% resolved immediately, but it was just like even them going to hell to get him. I didn't expect that to go down as fast as it did. That literally all went down in the first episode. That's pretty impressive. I thought it was going to be a thing of like they kind of leave defeated, and then it turns into a whole thing of like maybe periodically throughout the season they'll pop back in and they'll try to save the I thought it'd be kind of throughout the entire season them trying to save Nick. I didn't think they'd probably save him until maybe the midway part. I wasn't expecting it to be done in like episode 1. Because even the trailers show that like Harvey, Roz, and Theo were going to go with Sabrina, which I think is kind of cool. They are like the Fright Club and everything. Because I don't think they ever gave themselves a different name. Because we see that's the name of their band and everything, which that's pretty cool that they have a band. It's interesting too, because we don't ever get to fully explore hell. We get to see different areas in hell, showing you just like the geography, I guess, of hell a little bit. There's a beach area, there's a forest, even a twisted take on the whole like follow the yellow brick road, follow the bloody brick road, which is kind of interesting because it leads to pandemonium where Lilith resides, which even I start kind of considering. I mean, I'm surprised they never questioned it, but it's like every time you got there, because it's like, oh, Lilith said that, because when it came down to it, they were like, oh, Lilith said that you guys don't need to be tortured. They don't need to be tortured anymore. She's going to see them. I'm like, that's so interesting. They never brought up the fact that you're torturing us. And Sabrina should have said it specifically. I literally gave you the crown to hell, but I guess more so than anything, if Sabrina came to, well, because I think she didn't want to take the chance that Sabrina might change her mind and want the throne now, because she sees, whether Sabrina was willing to see it at the time or not was obviously like that kind of lust for power. Everyone kind of has it. Just depends on whether you kind of give into those, desires or not. But I guess she also thought like if Sabrina came there to get Nick, there's no like easy solution with the whole Lucifer being inside of them situation. So that's probably a thing of like, that's probably another concern. Or I don't know. She's kind of been basically for the past 2 seasons kind of underneath Sabrina, and she finally has everything she wants. Like I said, she just doesn't want to have Sabrina end up taking it all away from her. All that she spent so long, working for this position, and lo and behold, she doesn't want it taken away from her. The whole situation was also interesting too, because we see that Theo's uncle Jesse is there. Because I was like, oh man, like they did an exorcism and everything, but it's like, well, to be fair, what's her face? Lilith did kill him after all, so it's like, well, that kind of comes as no surprise. But then we also see like Tommy's there, but it's like, is that really the real Tommy? He was like the Tin Man and everything, which I guess is befitting considering their whole original thing. I mean, he was kind of like a zombie in part 1 because he didn't have his soul, but I guess that could almost borderline as like a Tin Man thing. But it's like, was that really? Because we know that his soul ended up getting, we don't know if it got devoured. It potentially got devoured, so I don't know. They never circled back to that, but it could just be hell kind of messing with him. I don't know. I mean, that could have just been Lilith's own little spice to do that. Who knows? Roz ends up running into her grandma, who's blaming her for being like, "Oh, it's because of you I ended up dying." It's like it was just natural causes of your time. I wonder. I wonder, is that kind of supposed to insinuate because maybe all the women in Roz's family who get the cunning go to hell because they were cursed by witches. Maybe that's what that's supposed to be. They never went into detail about that. Like I said, that's just me making that assumption. But I'm just like, why would her grandma go to hell? Also, the principal is there. It just seemed like straight up, if you're killed by a demon, I guess when a demon kills you, they straight up just drag you to hell. Which also begs the question. It makes you wonder. Never came up. Makes you wonder, is Adam there somewhere? Maybe Lilith's situation is when she kills you, she automatically drags you to hell. Because I'm like I said, I feel like if that was the case, we would have seen like Adam there. Lilith's, or rather, more specifically, Miss Wardwell's Adam. That's what I'm curious about. But nevertheless, I'd also liked it too that the fact is the reason why they were able to have access to go there was because Dorian was like, "Oh yeah, you can use one of my paintings. I want you to get a special flower to help me with this pimple." And I'm like, "You're such a shallow dude," but I mean that's your whole thing. But it's like that was so interesting. Like literally, you wanted them to go to hell for this one flower to help with your pimple, a pimple that no one can really see. But then later on, it kind of becomes a little more apparent. But you get what I'm trying to say. And you also feel so bad for Nick, because despite, well, for one, he's constantly in a struggle over his body for control over, with Lucifer. Turns out Lilith cut his tongue out. I'm sure that was more so to keep Lucifer quiet, but it is also at the same time a super messed up considering that's Nick's body. But for her, even if she has to hurt Nick to hurt Lucifer, even though it's not going to affect him, Lilith's just kind of twisted. Which is like you thought you'd kind of, I don't know, I think you'd be a little more grateful to the person who's literally housing the guy that's going to want to kill you for revenge because of what you did, that whole thing. But regardless, an aspect I wasn't expecting at all was the fact is that Sabrina had to reluctantly take the crown of hell, because obviously, like, it turns out that obviously, the whole situation of when it's all said and done, the hell is off kilter. Because I was wondering if it was like, oh, does Lucifer have to be on the throne for it to be that type of thing? But it's a morning star, because Lilith doesn't have a rightful claim to the throne, and because of that, like, not just hell but earth and heaven. And that was kind of interesting element. I thought because they referenced heaven that there would be heavenly aspects to this. We get one angel this season, but that's also an angel we'd already seen previously. So I'm curious if that's something they're ever going to like deal with going forward, like the whole heaven route. They kind of dealt with it in a tiny bit of a way, but we'll get to there soon enough. Well, I'll just go ahead and talk about it. Well, when Robert Robinson was basically, Sabrina led him to one of the two cards, one of them leading to heaven, the other one leading to hell. That's the only other angle to that. And I'm surprised there weren't consequences for that. I mean, who's to say? There are always consequences to stuff. I think that's actually a really neat element that has been consistent throughout the entire series. Is the fact is Sabrina, and you could call it being young and naive, which I think she's very idealistic but naive and young, because she believes she can have everything, but you can't have everything without sacrificing something. You try to get everything, you risk walking away with nothing at all. And that's the sad thing, is that Sabrina time after time continues to think she can break the rules without there being consequences. And typically when the consequences happen, like, everyone else kind of tends to suffer. In this particular case, because of everything of her not taking the throne, more specifically because they kind of knocked Lucifer off his throne, because his power is where all witches' power come from. So, or at least this particular coven's power. We don't know how because it seems like, I don't know, they're not the only satanic, because they might be technically the only satanic witches that are left are the ones that are in Greendale. Because obviously later on we get introduced to the pagans and stuff like that. But I'm saying, like, all the other witches around the world, either because this satanic group is the only ones who pray to Lucifer, so their powers come from him, whereas others pray to different gods. Obviously the pagans have theirs, and everyone else, has theirs as well. So maybe there's another satanic group that was affected, but it seemed like they only focused on this particular group because they met the other hedge witches who their magic comes from different places, so they're not at under the same scrutiny as the Greendale witches are, So I thought that was kind of an interesting element. But obviously them, like, powers waning over the course of the season. And like I said, every time they get a step further, like, oh, this will give us our power back, it gets taken away from them because of other circumstances. because they never realized the consequences that would come about because there was no rightful heir. Because that's what I was wondering, because that's what I thrown up in my trailer discussion was like, is it because Lilith isn't really doing her job the right way? But I think maybe there is no right way to do her job, considering like it's not that she's doing things necessarily wrong, it's just she's not the right person that's supposed to be on the throne, and it throws all three realms out of balance. I think that's what it mostly comes down to, because we never actually got to hear whether or not she was actually doing a good job. She knew the ins and the outs of the job because she ended up teaching Sabrina, but we never found out whether or not like she actually was doing a good job as a whole, Satan situation. There's Ambrose and Prudence tracking down Father Blackwood. Interestingly enough, and I'll point this out, there's so many different Riverdale references here and there. I'm like, oh, that's so interesting, because one thing I should keep in mind, because I literally like this week there was the episode of Riverdale. There were like different football teams, that the whole Stonewall thing, right? One of those people, I didn't think about it at the time because it had been a little while since I'd previously seen Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. One of said people is the actor who played Billy, if I'm not mistaken. He had popped up in Riverdale. I believe that's the same actor, like as one of the football people that Betty met with. So I thought that was interesting. Now that I'm seeing that in retrospect. Plus, when they were trying to track down Father Blackwood, Prudence took on the form of a lady. That was the actress who plays Penelope Blossom on Riverdale, and I was like, holy crap. I was like, that's so interesting. Another one is the fact that because it's like it wasn't her taking on that particular person, like it was just a disguise, but I think it's like it's little winks and nods to them referencing the other shows. I think they reference each other, but it's never like an outright connected being like this exactly. I think it's that they're trying to insinuate they take place in the same universe while staying away, because obviously. And to me, I love that whole situation because obviously, like I said, the trials and stuff like that define the unholy regalia. Like I said, we'll kind of really break that down in a little bit. But I want to talk about it while it's on my mind. Is the fact is that the first one was the crown, and it's like, oh, you wouldn't guess where it is. And Sabrina was like, oh, don't tell me. Greendale was like, close enough. Ambrose was like, in Riverdale. And I even love they throw shade towards Riverdale. They're like, oh my God, almost like, oh my God, that place is so evil. I'm like, that's so funny. Everything that's supernatural and crazy and wild that goes out in Greendale, and they're still like, oh my God, we have to go to Riverdale? And it's like, well, to be fair, and they literally say, because I know they made like I said, I referenced this before, like they in the previews for Katie Keene, Josie says in that preview for that, and they're like, oh, I'm from Riverdale, the murder capital. Literally on the sign saying, welcome to Riverdale, literally on the other side it says, murder capital, JJ Wazir. I'm assuming it's supposed to be, well, the only JJ I'm aware of is Jason, because that's what Cheryl calls him. Because it turns out, like, the last person who had the crown was a blossom. And I was like, oh, and what tree were they in? It was a tree, because I was like, oh, of course the crown would be hidden in a tree, because it's like, right, the blossoms do the whole, like, maple syrup thing. And even when Ambrose was being attacked, he's like, why do I smell maple syrup? I'm like, I love that, like, connection like that. Stuff like that, I just thought so interesting. Like, so, obviously that was on my mind, but obviously going back to Ambrose and Prudence is obviously... it's actually kind of sad when you look at their story, just because I'm going to be skipping around a lot, so I do apologize. But like obviously, like they had their issues last season, but they also came back together because of their hatred for Father Blackwood, and obviously tracking him down wasn't the easiest thing. They met with Mamba Marie, and she ended up helping them. I was actually suspicious of her the entire season. I'm like, because it's like, because they even made it clear, like, she kind of has her own reasons for being here. And I'm like, I don't know. But it seems like, oh no, it turns out Mamba Marie seems like she's pretty cool. She's pretty legit. So I was like, okay, no, I'm not, so that kind of caught me off guard for a little bit. But obviously, they ended up helping Prudence and Ambrose track down Father Blackwood, who's in Scotland. Basically, he was trying to do something, because basically that little spear he has basically has something to do with time. He basically had been away for like 15 years with Judith and Letitia, who's just going by Judith now. And I'm like, because at first I was wondering, I was like, is that supposed to be that twins? And I was like, no, it must not be. It must be random people. Oh no, it super is the twins. So it's like, and obviously Prudence never got her opportunity to kill her dad like she wanted to. And it's actually, like I said, it's just sad because like her and Ambrose were kind of like such a thing. They were a tight-knit team and just everything. I mean, it's almost sad too, just because it's like, well, it's always been kind of fun between them, but then it did seem like it got serious. But, you know, sadly that falls apart by the end of the season, because it's like literally everything that goes down. Prudence is like, if you'd let me kill my father back when we found him, but it's like, he knew too much. I mean, to be fair, he was a necessary evil to basically keep him around, would meant setting Nick free. But at the same time, it's like, because you put literally the most two evil people together, that being Blackwood and Lucifer, you led to things playing out the way they did. It's just, like I said, it's an amalgamation of so much going wrong in this season that just like, it's hard to say whether even though they won, are there any real victories? Because it just seems like temporary victories that will eventually turn into losses type of situation, if you get what I'm trying to say. Then there's a whole situation of Zelda having to lead the coven, because for her, it's like, you know, I'll be the high priestess and everything. Obviously, their coven has grown so small. There's only, so many people left. And so she's trying to lead the charge, but then like her and Hilda have to cover up when the council comes around. And especially because Hilda having to disguise herself as Blackwood. What's interesting, though, is I was actually kind of expecting that to probably be more of an issue, the council popping up. Because, like, wasn't his name Methuselah, the dude that Hilda killed last episode for making some unwanted passes at her? Because even Zelda at the time was like, oh, there'll be consequences. They'll want your head for this. But I guess they covered that up, because that never came up this season. So I guess that was kind of not an issue. But the fact of the matter is, the council was talking about there being potency issues. I'm like, what the hell is that? But obviously later on you get context of understanding, like obviously that, I guess because they use their type of magics to kind of, like maybe they use their magic to help them with their potency issue, but because their magic was kind of waning, it's kind of like the magicians, like as magic kind of disappeared, any wards or any special magic you have constantly going will disappear. Maybe that's what that's supposed to be, or maybe it was just something else entirely. Regardless, it is an interesting conversation. It shows you how pompous and like they are nothing but like figureheads, because when the time came, it's like, oh, you've been in contact with our lawyer? Yeah, I talked to him today. I'm like, it's like, which Zelda and Hilda know that's complete and utter BS, because Lucifer's not in control, obviously, in hell at the time that they were aware of. Lilith was, so it's just like showing that they're kind of flying by the seat of their pants, that they're not as knowledgeable. I guess that's also why they never pop up throughout the rest of the season, because like while we go to those imbeciles, we're literally more in the know about what's going on, because the whole point was not to let them know, because like obviously they felt like if the council ever found out they overthrew Lucifer, the person, their Dark Lord that they were worshiping, it'd be more of an issue. But it's like, obviously they'll never find out, because they're not even, because like that's, the Dark Lord was always kind of like a essence to people, in the sense that very rarely, I think, did people actually interact with him, except from time to time. But I guess it shows like, I guess they don't want to seem weak, or like, oh, we haven't been in like they want to show like, oh, no, we're still in charge, we're in control. Of course we've talked to the Dark Lord, this and that, so regardless. And it's interesting with Zelda and Hilda's story, because it also presents an interesting situation again, whereas Hilda's always kind of caught up in Zelda's shadow, because Zelda's like, oh, I'm going to need your help, I'm running things, and she's like, oh, but I wanted to spend time with Dr. C. It's like, no, come on. So it's like she kind of gets dragged along. Even that whole thing of Hilda making an erotica book, which is interesting, because Dr. Cerberus kind of told her to be like, oh, no, you go ahead and do that. And even what pissed Zelda off is like, you also made me the villainous sister. And Hilda kind of being snide, being like, oh, right what you know. And I'm like, oh, poor Hilda. Also, I did not realize her full name was Helga. Oh, no, I'm stupid. I forgot. That's like her pen name. I was like, because her name is Helga Stillwater. I was like, oh, is Hilda supposed to be short for Helga or something? I was like, no, I'm stupid. No, it's her pseudonym, her pen name. But and Zelda being so like mean about it, like turning her book blank and being like, oh, see, much better. It's like, oh, that was mean spirited. But it's also because Zelda feels like she's losing Hilda, because like she's mean to her, but let's not forget season 1 where she had that nightmare where she killed Hilda, but Hilda didn't come back. She broke down because she'll never admit it, but like her sister is her rock, her foundation. She can't do anything without her sister. She's lost without her. She loves her so much. They have a very complicated relationship, they do, but she never admits to Hilda how much she loves and cares about her. Obviously nearing the end, the finale kind of showcases that a lot, but it's just like I don't think Zelda's not the biggest on like showing her feelings really. Because I think she feels like if you kind of give into your emotions too much, it comes off as a bit of a weakness in her mind, I think. But obviously she cares very deeply for her sister. But obviously it was that whole complicated thing when like, oh yeah, Dr. C proposed to me and everything. And it's like, oh, obviously you said yes. And it's like, yes. And she's like, are you mad? She's like, no, I'm not mad. I'm just utterly disappointed because it seems like you and Sabrina don't care about this family. I was like, oh, come on. Don't say that. But it's also because she even said it herself of like, it's just further proof of you're going to leave me behind. Like, she's scared of her sister leaving her behind, you know? So I just think that's kind of a beautiful element to that, where it's just kind of, like I said, she's just not willing to admit. I hope that changes, because he's like, you might want to take those opportunities because you may not, it's almost interesting. I wonder did they do Hilda's storyline the way it is, obviously making it so like, oh, she might not come back. Like I said, I'm skipping around a lot, so I do apologize. But remember, like I just brought up, that was her nightmare in season 1, that her sister wouldn't come back. I wonder, was that them kind of bringing that back to fruition in a certain extent? I would think so. Like, that might be them kind of playing with that a little bit. But that, like I said, that could be me reading too much into that. And I felt so bad for Hilda when it seemed like, oh, she killed Dr. Cerberus. I was like, oh, come on. Because at first she was trying to put up a glamour to but I'm sure because their powers were waning, the glamour didn't work as long. Like, probably if their powers were up to full, she probably could have kept the glamour up, but eventually found out. But despite all that, he's like, I'm not going to leave. Like, he cares about her. And she talked about getting, like, that was another Riverdale reference of, like, I'm assuming she was talking about Pops. She was like, oh, a place for hamburgers and milkshakes. And I was like, Pops? They never said the actual name, because once again, probably don't want to connect too much, but still, then that poor guy walked in, right, another reference, literally a Southside Serpent walked in. I'm like, that's interesting, considering the fact is, like, we haven't seen the other Southside Serpents, but none of them, last time we checked, they were deputies, most of them, and we haven't seen them at least the younger ones were. We haven't seen them rolling around with their jackets, obviously, this season and stuff like that, and not as much last season. So it's just that interesting element, I think. But regardless of all of that, I think it's, I felt bad because it's like Hilda like literally ate him and blood splattered her. I was like, that's probably like the most bloody scene we've seen in the show. I was like, it was literally an explosion of blood landing on that floor. I was like, ugh, that literally, wow, that's a lot of blood. And then Dr. C shows up, and it seems like she killed him, and Hilda's distraught. She asked her sister to kind of put her down. The hope was like, hey, if I kill you and then put you in the backyard, you'll be able to resurrect. But I think because of the whole situation of like magic's waning around them, even their backyard was being affected by it. So, and all of this being a byproduct of the pagans, it's so interesting. Like, I guess because to be fair, the pagans and the satanic witches have had beef for a long time, because the satanic witches came and like wiped them out. Like, the pagans that they run into might be like one of the last groups, if not, I think they might have been referencing that they in fact are the last group. But no, because I was about to say, like, you start a beef over nothing. It's just like you went out of your way because it's like, oh, Nick ended up killing a snake, and it's like, oh, they keep animals as pets, well, more like familiar. It's like they were looking for an excuse. Cause at first they were like, oh, like, because Hilda offered her hand to be like, oh, let's all eat together and everything. But it's like their approaches to everything, what the pagans believe and how the satanic witches kind of go about things, didn't mesh together. So that led to like, was it Cersei putting that spell on Hilda, turning her more and more into a spider? Because at first, like, when we see her eating a fly and everything, I was like, oh, is she getting turned into a frog or something? That's what I thought, because I assumed but it's like, no, like, spiders eat flies as well. That might have been webs shooting out of her mouth. I thought it was like a frog's tongue. I thought that's what was happening to Hilda. But it also shows you like the lack of communication between, because Hilda was trying to explain like, oh, I think they did something to me. It's like, no, they did something to all of us, Hilda. Zelda just so concerned with so much stuff, and because of that, Hilda didn't want to concern her. It's like, oh, she's got too much on her plate already. Like, the fact of the matter is, it's sad, Some other interesting developments, obviously everything between Roz and Harvey. I love that Harvey's storyline continues to kind of be what it is, where he feels the need to kind of have to prove himself. He wants to prove like, no, I'm strong, I'm brave, I don't have to, I'm not weak. Like, that's one of his biggest insecurities, and to see that constantly, that continues to be his arc throughout the show, is that he wants to prove that, like, no, like, he, because when Roz was like, oh, I'm going to go to the carnival with some friends, Harvey was like, wait, friends, but aren't we boyfriend and girlfriend? It's like, she's like, yeah, but we're going with friends, right? And it's like he starts kind of feeling like, oh, you're kind of embarrassed to be with me or something like that, which is not the case at all. But like I said, and then Harvey just felt like he that thing where it's like, oh, test your strength. He couldn't, he just it was just sad that he felt that way. There was an interesting situation with, I forgot her name, but she's the one that's basically a Gorgon. I was almost just expecting it to be like, oh, her name was Medusa, but they never said her. Did they say her name? Like, I think they did. Because Cersei, she's from Greek mythology, isn't she? Isn't she? The whole turning people into animals thing? Because obviously she turns some of the jocks into pigs. But I was like, yeah, that's like Odysseus stuff, isn't it? From the Odyssey? That's what I think so, but I could be. I'm not. I know some Greek mythology. I know Medusa definitely is, but I think that's who she's supposed to be. But I don't think they refer to her as Medusa. I don't know whether she was. I would assume that she would just either she's Medusa or she'd be a Gorgon, because obviously like Medusa's the mother of Gorgons, but obviously there are other Gorgons as well. Whole thing, but because I don't know if Pan's Greek or not. He might not be Greek. He might be something else. I'm not going to get too caught up in the ins and outs of that whole situation. But then you kind of feel bad. Dorcas gets turned to stone. Agatha gets driven insane. Luckily, they were able to save Dorcas, but I guess there was no immediate means of repair. I guess once your mind is broken like that, there's no fixing it, because they never were able to fix Agatha. They were able to fix Dorcas, but not her. And eventually Roz, which is even sadder because Roz got broken to pieces later on. They literally had to piece her back together. They had to get her out of the way because Roz could see stuff with her cunning. Because at first she saw Pan for who he really was, and it's like they immediately recognized her as someone with cunning, and it's like, oh, we can't have her around. She'll kind of ruin our plans. So they end up turning her to stone. That whole storyline. I don't think we're done with that Roz, Sabrina, Harvey storyline. I don't think we are, because basically the whole when her getting turned to stone, and it's like part of me, it's like, oh, you have to give up something you love. I was like, oh, well, because the other dude had to give up sculpting because that was his love, and I was like, oh, Harvey loves to draw, so I thought that, but it's like, no, he had to give up his love for Rosalind for the spell to work and everything to turn her back to from stone. And Harvey kissed her, but it didn't work because whether he admit, he cared for Roz, but there was still a part of him that he wasn't willing to admit it. Sabrina wasn't willing to admit it, but she wasn't willing to take a chance on it. As the fact is, there was a part of Harvey that still loved Sabrina. That wasn't going away. And it's hard to say because later on she burns a candle. I'm curious, she ended up putting Harvey's name up there. She put Nick's first, but then Harvey's. I wonder, did that kind of mess with that in some way? Did that come because she put two names on that? Maybe it didn't burn all the way through. What I mean is maybe Nick still kind of has complicated feelings for Sabrina, and maybe Harvey does too. Or maybe it did work. I'm curious to see kind of where that is. It's meant to work as both ways. Make it so Sabrina doesn't feel anything towards them, but also make it so they don't feel anything well, it seemed like it was more so for Sabrina's sake, but maybe it works both ways too. I'm not sure. They were the only person Prudence was talking about more so was oh, it would affect you, make you not remember, kind of feel, Nick, because Nick was going through a lot of stuff. At first, a lot of times you're like, man, Nick is acting like an asshole. Even that whole it's like, oh, what's up, Nick? I'm he was getting snippy with Harvey at the carnival. He was like, oh man, I'm just saying, I was just saying, hey, relax. He's like, I am relaxed. So obviously, you can understand, granted, everything that he went through. He never really went too much into detail about everything that went down, struggling mentally for control over his body with Lucifer. That couldn't have been easy. And then him snapping at Sabrina at one point, being like, everything I went through, yes, I'm coping with things in my own way, whether it's with sex demons, with drinking. The fact of the matter is I'm trying to deal with it. And the fact is, at the end of the day, Sabrina, I don't think you were worth making that sacrifice for. It's like, Jesus. And even Prudence later on, it's like, did Nikki at any point in time thank you for not only saving him, You know, because he's also the one that betrayed you and everything. So, because even Sabrina snaps back at him later on because he starts getting snippy because it's like she sees him with Caliban and everything. And she's like, yo, don't get this twisted. I'm sorry what happened to you, but you don't get to kind of disrespect me like that. The fact of the matter is, no one can ever thank you for that sacrifice that you made, but you don't get to come at me like that. Don't act like you were pure and innocent. You've made your own mistakes in this situation. It's like, once again, you were manipulated by the Dark Lord. Literally, you helped shape me and push me down that path in the first place, so don't get it twisted. And he kind of felt like, all right, yeah, you was being a humongous dick about the whole situation. Hell, he's the one that heavily messed up. He's the one that let Faustus and the Dark Lord get away in the first place. Just because I get it, he was in so much pain. You felt bad for him, but at the same time, it's like you're doing one dickish move after another. Like, because not only were you self-harming yourself, your self-harm didn't just stop with you. It literally affected everyone. And so they basically had to detox him the entire... I mean, to be fair, it kind of worked out in the end because it turns out Lucifer had left some form of residue in him, so that's why Nick could still feel him. But later on, he was still being a dick because he still hadn't fully processed the PTSD, the trauma he had gone through, you know? So it was a byproduct of all of that, you know? So now him and Sabrina are simply friends, but, you know, like I said, I'm curious to see if that ends up staying the course, especially because it seemed like they might be setting up like him and Prudence maybe going forward. I don't know. Seems like Sabrina's love life sadly doesn't work out. Like, it's always sad when you see that, where it's just kind of like, oh, you expect certain people to be in game, but now it's like, I don't know. Is someone new going to come into our life, or someone old? Like I said, that's why I feel like the whole Harvey thing isn't done yet. Like, even though him and Roz are good, you know, it seems like they're, I think, because even Roz has her concerns, because obviously when she was making out with Harvey, like, all she could see with her cunning was him making out with Sabrina, because I think there'll always be a part of his heart that belongs to her. He's like, no, she was my girlfriend. I loved her. I always will. And he's like, oh, who cares about that stupid spell, which Roz hadn't heard about, like the spell and everything. And she was even going to bring it up to Sabrina, but she decided not to. Because it's like, once again, it's like that's her best friend. Her best friend needed help. Once again, I just thought that was, you know, like, there's definitely going to be some angles to that going forward. I didn't even talk about it, but that was something I was wondering about last season too, because everyone else has kind of got their SOs. We have like Nick and Sabrina, even though it's complicated. Harvey and Roz, even though it's a little complicated, but not as complicated. I was wondering what was going to happen with Theo, but Theo meets a new person in town. Robin, interesting enough, I believe that's the same actor who played, I think his character, wasn't it Luke from Beyond? He played Holden's brother. And Beyond, he's also popped up in other stuff, but I think that's the thing that kind of comes to my mind. I believe that's the same actor. I could be mistaken. But him and Theo kind of hit it off, and that's pretty dope. And I like the fact just because Theo's kind of worried, because it's like, oh, how do I ask someone out? I've never done it before. And even the fact is that, you know, Theo was like, I should let you know I wasn't Theo, I was Susie before, but for Robin, it's like, so you're Theo now, and I like you, and I'm like, oh, it works out. But then you find out, oh, never mind, Robin's actually he's with the pagans. I'm like, oh no, because it turns out they're interested in three people: Wardwell, Harvey, and Theo, because it turns out they're virgins. Which we'll get. Well, let's go ahead and talk about the Wardwell situation. That's got to be so weird. I don't know what I expected them to do with that storyline, the whole Wardwell thing. I didn't expect that to be a recurring thing like it was. It's interesting enough considering the fact is Lilith kept the face and everything. So for her, it's just like, oh, something she kind of got used to and everything, despite all that. But Wardwell is kind of dealing with the fact is, like, obviously things aren't 100% right. Like, obviously she's missing like those 3 months of time while Lilith was around parading as her. But along with all that, she's trying to find out whatever happened to Adam. She kind of felt like Adam was dead and everything, which is even more morbid later on when Lilith shows up disguised as Adam. That was super messed up. And it's so ironic because, like, oh, Blackwood came to her. Obviously, the devil's still inside him at the time, being like, oh, the devil snuck into your house disguised. It's like so funny. You're up here getting so caught up in the Lilith situation, getting caught up in the Spellman's being witches situation, you didn't realize you literally let the devil into your own house. Literally, the devil was in front of you pretending to be a priest. Which is interesting considering the fact this Faustus was high priest, but of the Church of Night. The irony runs super deep in that situation, you know. Hell, I didn't expect her to do what she did. She ended up shooting Zelda because she was like, oh, it was witches that did this to my Adam and everything, which is like, for one, you picked the wrong people for one, literally the person who killed your Adam was right in front of you. It wasn't even Lilith. It was Lucifer, and he was right there in front. It's just kind of sad. I was like, oh, I was curious about that. I mean, obviously, she'll never have any memory of everything because Sabrina wipes her memory later on. Like I said, once again, I'm all over the place, but it was just like, that sucked, her shooting Zelda and everything, especially because at the time, Zelda's dealing with the whole thing like, oh, come on, Hilda, come back to life and everything, but still. I've kind of steered away from it, not on purpose, but I should also focus on that being an element to this whole, like, not only did Sabrina have to become king of hell, I was actually kind of surprised by the fact is that there was also, like, I didn't expect the whole trial angle to the whole situation. That basically the unholy regalia, having to get all three. The first one being the crown from Herod, which I was surprised at that situation of him. And it's so interesting too because his crown is kind of alive. It's like, oh, who took you? And it's like, oh, Sabrina. And it was like, huh, that was interesting. Pretty disgusting when Ambrose ended up having to explode. I guess because that wand in particular had gotten supercharged from the crown. So the moment Ambrose was like, no, let me keep it like for a little bit so I can give it some power to our people. It's like somehow Caliban's going to get his hands on that damn crown. Lo and behold, he does, because he leaves Sabrina there to kind of face off against Herod and everything. I also love the fact is that Lilith acts as like her regent and everything, which to be fair, because Lilith has her own reasons for doing this, because she thinks like, oh, when it's all said and done, Sabrina, because it's like, oh, we're fighting for our throne, and Sabrina's like, our throne? And she's like, yes, our throne. Because if she can't directly have it, she'll be the one whispering in Sabrina's ears about what actions to make and everything. There's a lot to that whole situation. I'd even skipped over that whole like dragging souls. Obviously, I referenced it earlier with the Robert Robertson thing of like, oh, he made a sacrifice to made a deal with the devil to become the greatest chess master, which kind of reminds me of the lawyer. I'm blanking on his name from season 1 who helped her when Sabrina when she was on trial. That dude, he did the same thing to become the best lawyer. Obviously, it comes with a price. I'm surprised Sabrina never had to really deal with that. I mean, that could always be something that kind of circles back around, but nevertheless, I like that being an element of us kind of getting to see like the day-to-day work of the devil, and for her to kind of have to collect souls. In particular, it's like, oh, Jimmy Platt. I was like, who's that supposed to be? It's like, oh, the ice cream dude. Oh man, really? That's such a shame. Until we find out, holy crap, Jimmy's a terrible, terrible person. He sacrifices innocent souls, in particular children, so that he can extend his contract. It's like, oh, no. Like, give me an extra 7 years by sacrificing a soul. It turns out all Lucifer asked for was a soul. Picking children was 100% Jimmy. That was his predication. I was like, holy shit. And Jimmy just got a smile on his face. It's psychotic looking and everything. It's like, he's a true sociopath. And obviously Roz and Sabrina working together to save that little girl Lucy and everything. So luckily they were able to, well, it's more so because Sabrina has a tendency once again to leap before she looks, and ends up stuck inside. I mean, I guess when you've kind of made deals with the devil, you learn enough stuff over the years on how to kind of keep yourself protected, because he had a whole bunch of sigils in that room to make it so that Sabrina could get in, but not out. But I liked it at the end when it's like, oh, we saved Lucy. Oh, gotcha. When she pretended to be a little kid, he's like, oh, like trapping her and everything. And then the bodyguard, which the last time we saw him was last season, when Prudence and them sent him in to torture Ambrose. That was the last time we saw the bodyguard dude. But I love that while he's getting dragged to hell, Sabrina's chewing on some ice cream. I'm like, yo, because there's that scene is in the trailer of her eating ice cream, but you don't have the context of that whole thing of like, yo. And you almost see it I mean, obviously Sabrina enjoys this one because it's like, oh, he's a terrible person. And it's like, oh yeah, like, Lilith, give him the special treatment. And she's like, well, his body might not be useful afterwards. Well, even so, if we have to, we'll find a different body. It's like, yo, because he needed a special place in hell for all that he did. I was like, wow. And I like the thought that Sabrina is trying to reform hell at one point in time, which obviously some of the people don't appreciate that. Caliban in particular pining for the throne. It is interesting how you call yourself Prince of Hell. I guess because he's literally made from the clay, the soil in hell. I guess that makes you a child of hell, even though you're not Lucifer's kid. It makes him almost a different son of hell, I guess, interestingly enough. I wasn't really sure where that whole Caliban storyline was going to go, because at first it seemed like, oh man, he's a complete and utter dick. But then he actually kind of like showed a different side of himself with Sabrina, where he was like, I do have honor and stuff like that. And you're like, oh, maybe there's something more to him. And then the fact of the matter is, but then he kind of turns on Sabrina later on, because it's like, oh, because she called him out for cheating. But then later on he's like, you cheated because you switched with Barbaros. What was it? Barbaros? And you switched with him, and then like you left me behind, so I basically had to I am initially clay, so I basically had to lay there for like 2,000 years until I can get back to this time because you left me behind. Which obviously Sabrina felt bad about it, but it's like, well, you're kind of in it to win it, and obviously the gloves were kind of off from there. He even at one point suggested, oh, why don't we kind of, rule together, but it's like, she wasn't really too keen on that idea, but obviously it was a kind of a thing of like, it came down to someone had to win. Obviously, he, like I said, jumping around, he wins, but obviously he wasn't a capable leader, because it turns out, obviously, we get a quick summary of like, oh yeah, he got his ass handed to him. Later on, we found out, oh, he died. Not only did he get his ass handed to him, he ended up dying. It's like, ooh, you suck. You thought you were so great that you're going to be the one, but you couldn't stop anything. Because I thought it was so interesting, because we had so many things going, like everything going down on in hell, everything going down on earth with the whole pagans. Makes you wonder what was going topside in heaven. I mean, like I said, I'm surprised we never got a look onto that side of things. I would expect, since all three realms were being affected, but I guess it's like it's their mess to kind of clean up. So heaven wasn't planning on getting involved. They might going forward. We'll have to wait and see on that. In that regard. It was interesting, too, because, there's a whole Vlad the Impaler situation, which was part of the third unholy regalia, and then it's, the 30 pieces of silver, and it turns out he's Judas's father, and then him, I was wondering at that, I was like, oh, that's not going to work, is it? Like, him biting Sabrina, and he does, and it's like, oh, you're a celestial. It's like, yeah, her dad was an angel and everything, so it's like, oh. Because it's interesting, too, because I like that, too. We actually got an explanation, the fact is Lucifer's powers don't come from him, it's not like, oh, the infernal powers of, being from hell. It's like, no, even Sabrina's powers, they're not infernal, they're angelic, which is so ironic, him being a devil and everything. His powers aren't some hell-bound power. All his powers stem from him being an angel, and that kind of happens. So, more so than anything, Sabrina's kind of she's human, witch, and angelic. I think rather than infernal, we'll probably just go for it with the whole celestial angle rather than infernal. But maybe because his angelic abilities have been sullied and darkened, maybe it is more infernal now. But by their nature, they're angelic and not infernal by nature. It seems like there is no actual power in hell, except for each respective demon kind of having their own powers, because demons work differently. Their power doesn't come from the same source like witches does, which, once again, their power kind of comes from the gods that they worship and the people they worship. In this particular case, the Greendale Coven's worshiping, Lucifer. I also think it's interesting, the whole situation of obviously slowly but surely everyone finds out about Sabrina's situation of being on the throne. First, her immediate family. First, it was Ambrose who found out, because she told him because she needed his help. But then her family, and then eventually the rest of the coven, which is so sad, because eventually they start blaming her, because it's like, oh, this is all her fault, which is so interesting. That conversation started with Elspeth and Melvin. Literally the two people she brought back to life last season. Kind of ironic. She basically saved your lives. But it's kind of interesting they end up turning on her. The Dark Lord came and was like, oh, you need to go to the pagans and ask to join them. I'm like, that's not actually Lucifer, is it? Either it actually is him and he's messing with you, or someone's disguising himself as Lucifer. Oh, no, it's him. He's getting back at the coven for betraying him. Which obviously had kind of done that before already with those bugs that kind of made everyone snap. Zelda wasn't herself, Agatha wasn't herself because of all those little bugs and everything. But poor Elspeth, she ends up getting her throat sliced and her blood was added. It's like I said, it's so... Because, it wasn't even sliced. It was it was stabbed, but it's that's almost... I guess it was almost life catching up to her, because that's actually how she died. But it's actually sad, too, because her and Melvin were kind of having their fun, even though Melvin was kind of with Dorcas. It's kind of sad. Like I said, it's sad because it's they kind of turned her back on Sabrina. Like, certain people had their, like, they were the only ones that were so outspoken about, like, feeling like Elspeth in particular was the one that was kind of like, it's Sabrina's fault, you know, sadly. But which even Lilith was saying that it was her fault because she decided to not take the throne. Everything was all bound, which is so interesting. You're the one that wanted the throne so much, but I guess at the same time, it's like, if you had just taken your responsibilities and become queen, it's like, why are you telling her that? You didn't want her to become queen, but I guess it's like, well, everything's off balance, so you need to be queen just for that sake. I mean, but I guess it's like, I don't know, if because the whole point, like I said, I don't really know what Lilith was kind of hoping at the end. Because the whole plan initially seemed like it was like, oh, like once she takes claim of the throne. Because the whole point was to initially get Sabrina to give her like a blessing for Lilith to take the throne. And it's like, yeah, it had to be more in an official capacity, but in the end, it didn't matter. So like Lilith still would have had to been on the side, you know, working as a regent. But I think it's because like I said, she felt like that was probably the only position of power she was going to be in. Like I said, it's just kind of like you're kind of like stuck on the sidelines yet again. You were there on the sidelines with Lucifer promising you to be queen. The moment you actually become queen, it's like, yeah, you had that taken away from you, and you're literally playing sidebar to a 16-year-old. That's got to sting. Literally, the rest of hell wasn't too happy about that or too keen on that situation either. I actually kind of feel bad because one of the three kings of hell ended up getting their necks snapped by Lucifer, because it was just like disrespecting him and everything, which even that's an interesting element because of the whole like obviously how that whole thing went down. It's like, oh, Lilith separating Lucifer and Faust, but she like makes a deal with Faustus about like, okay, this is what's going to go down, and I'm like, okay, what's go? Oh, separate them, and to ensure that she gets to stay alive, Lilith impregnated herself, and it's like, oh, I have a son, and it's like, oh, I'm sure, well, because that's going to be interesting to see what ends up happening in that regard. Time does work differently down there in certain regards, depending on which circle of hell you're in, I guess. I mean, maybe in hell in general, but time works differently down there than it does on Earth. So there could be a whole aspect of she does eventually give birth and that child grows up rapidly. And because the whole thing becomes like, well, is that child, because I'm sure Lucifer would prefer having a son rather than, I don't know. Because that was more so his plan. Sabrina's kind of something that was his plan, that was his backing. But this was all Lilith's thing. This is more so to stay her own execution. She had to find her own way to survive in the grand scheme of things. But, you know, won't last forever. I wonder how she's gonna worm her way out of that situation the moment the baby, you know, is due. Faustus finds himself in that position where it's like, oh yeah, like I'm immortal now. I can't be killed because I have the mark of Cain. I wonder, is there any way? They never actually bring that up, whether there's a way to get around it or not. I mean, to be fair, he never gets killed later on, so you never know. Because I don't think, well, much like probably like the TV show Supernatural, the mark of Cain most likely can't be removed under normal circumstances. So. And that also ties into the other angle of something I didn't talk about either. Like I said, I brought it up earlier, like the whole Agatha being still driven insane. Like, I don't know if there was necessarily any cure for that. Maybe no, because like even though Pan dies later on, we do still see that Agatha is still, I think, like I said, once your mind is scrambled by Pan, I don't think there's any coming back from that insanity. But it's also like Agatha ended up killing Dorcas. It was like, oh my God, dude, that sucks. I was like, like I said, this is a depressing ass season because of that and just so much. Like I said, there's like warming, uplifting stuff to it. So I know, like, I didn't talk about it either, but I love Robin, like, revealing, like, oh, he's a hobgoblin in his whole, because I was wondering, like, because each one of them is kind of like their own, like, at least some of the pagans are something, and I was curious to see, like, what Robin's whole thing was, and his thing is he's super fast. So it's like, look at him kind of going all speedster-like. It's like the Medusa-like character was going towards Theo, and he was like, not these ones, because, like, all of them had become his friends because he felt bad about betraying them, so he ended up telling Theo, as well as everyone, the truth, and he ended up being a good ally. And I love that, like, in that moment you see him cover Theo's eyes to protect Theo and then dashes him away, and I was like, yo, that's actually pretty dope. But obviously kind of running through what is essentially that finale, well, the finale and everything, well, it's like episode 7 and 8, literally everything went wrong. That was just the craziest thing. Obviously, Prudence and Agatha, Prudence having to accidentally kill Agatha to stop her, Blackwood stabbing her because getting her back for the fact is, oh, you betrayed me and everything. And once again, he wants to get back at his coven for betraying him. It's like, the coven you literally killed like 80% of the members of? That said coven? Oh, they betrayed. Shut up. The person who ran and literally killed everyone else before leaving, you bastard, you know? He acts like he's the victim in all of this. He's arrogant prick. I mean, I guess that 15 years, maybe he was already a little deranged before he came back. I would assume so. But killing Prudence, her bleeding out in Ambrose's arms. Everything with Zelda. She was there, you know, in that afterlife realm of Hilda. Trying to, you know, get them to both come back. What Zelda saw in there, like, it did make it seem like she did kind of insinuate that it did seem like that was like a vision of the future, which I'm like, I'm curious if that's still I still feel like that is going to be how things kind of go down. We'll get to there soon enough, but I'm like, I think with the way things have played out, that could still be set in stone. But I was thinking, like, just because of all the timey-wimey stuff that kind of goes down at the end of the episode, at the end of the season, I'm like, I don't know, it might not exist anymore. Like I said, we'll get to there soon enough. But obviously, Edward, you know, being there, but more so, it makes you wonder, because apparently, like, everyone has that, you know, because Mambo Marie was like, oh yeah, everyone kind of basically has this guardian that follows them. In Zelda's case, it's hers takes on the form of their brother Edward. Makes you wonder what Hilda's would be. Regardless, might even be, ironically, a spider, maybe because spiders are her thing. She was even a spider for a little while. But regardless, that whole situation, she wakes up because she's like, oh yeah, I know how to save the coven. Lo and behold, at that moment, like, she sees that Mambo Marie is dead, and then Zelda gets stabbed. I was like, wait, what? I was like, no. Because, like, we know that the Banshee was there, and the Banshee's supposed to represent death, and, like, someone in the Spellman household was going down. I was like, wait, what? So I was like, that happened. Then Harvey getting hooked up to the Green Man, being sacrificed like that. Because you see at one point, it's like the wood going inside of his skin, and then you kind of hear a break because I think it snapped his neck. I'm like, Jesus, Nick is turned to stone. Robin had knives thrown at him, so he's dead because he was a traitor. Then Roz and Theo had to watch. Sadly, you know, Sabrina got tricked by Caliban, and she's stuck in stone. We never really, Ambrose kind of ended up trying to stop Blackwood from getting what he wanted, and in that moment, like, the Green Man activated, killing everyone, and at the same time, you're like, holy crap. I was like, and then the next episode is like, yeah, look at all this crazy stuff that went down. Caliban's trying to make the Earth the 10th circle, totally failed. The pagans won, and now the Earth basically went all The Last of Us 20 years later type of situation. I'm like, well, not even 20 years later, because it had been decades. And I'm like, holy crap. And Sabrina gets freed by other Sabrina, and it's like, what's going on here? Oh, we're doing some timey-wimey stuff. It's like, well, how did that happen then? If you got freed, but it's like, oh, we're explaining the whole time loop thing. And I love that line of like, yeah, you remember that old movie that, what was it? Like, I think it said Ambrose, like, you know, Back to the Future, which I'm like, yeah, which is so weird to say, but it's like, well, someone her age would call that movie super old. I mean, the movie is pretty damn old. It's like, what? It's like 35 years old at this point in time, I think, if my math's correct, and it most likely isn't. But obviously, Sabrina wakes up to find pretty much everything in disarray. Hell is in disarray. Like, everyone is gone. Because it turns out, like, the other people with her, like, her dad is one of the stone slabs beside her. Lilith is the other one. So it's like, they're out of commission. Hell pretty much fell apart because Caliban is dead, like I said. And we have the three protectors of each one of the unholy regalia, and I like that they kind of act as guardians. It doesn't come up really, well, it comes up a little bit later on, but it was kind of neat for a moment. Sabrina had like three guardians with her, because it's like, where the regalia go, they go. But she slowly looks around, finds the bodies of everybody. She finds Nick, she finds Harvey. Well, she doesn't recognize it being Harvey, but she realizes like that's Roz and Theo. Literally everyone, like her Aunt Hilda, never came back to life. In fact, we see that Salem is dead. Basically, the entire town was well, it's not even just the town, the entire world was kind of wiped out by that Green Man thing. Because it seems like even the pagans sacrificed themselves, because they're not around to see their work in action. I think even they ended up dying, because all flesh ended up melting. and anyone that was left ended up, like I said, going a little The Last of Us, because they're literally plant-based zombies that keep feeding blood because there are people still around, but those being that were left around are in flesh factory. Because the thing is, you never see the pagans again, so that's why I'm like, the initial pagans are dead. It's just a thing of like, our God is here perpetually making this earth a place for nature to kind of take back from like all the clutches of all those. It's a whole thing. It's just kind of almost like an environment, like a more extremist eco-terrorist level kind of environment. It's kind of like that type of situation of like, even if we die, this whole green man situation will perpetuate and keep, the system will keep itself going until like, the whole world is captured. We never get the full scale of it. We only seen Greendale, but it's kind of implied that the entire world is like that. Literally, the only people left with this whole situation is Sabrina and Ambrose. And it's like, oh, you weren't here, Sabrina, which is so messed up, because it's like, it's Sabrina being like, you literally told me to deal with the whole unholy regalia. You told me, you and aunties pushed me to go down this route. I wanted to be there for you guys, but you guys suggested I do this, because it's that, once again, it's that thing of like, Sabrina kind of wants the power, but at the same time, she does want to protect the people that she cares about. So, but then we do a little time traveling. They end up side note, I should also talk about it. The moment that she found that red town, I was like, oh, because I forgot Batty Bat's name until she says it later on. Because I was thinking of Bodhi. That's, for whatever reason, I don't know where I'm getting that name from, Bodhi. I know it from something. I don't remember where I'm getting it from, but that's what I thought Batty Bat's name was, because it's been a while, but obviously, that was a sleep demon from like season 1. I love how they end up using that against Blackwood. But other than that, which it seems like, well, I guess even he couldn't be affected by it, because with the Mark of Cain, I think nothing can kill him. Obviously that's the whole point, so. But then like the weapon necessary to kind of charge the time traveling with that egg thing is a Morning Star, how very befitting. And she ends up time traveling, and so she uses this opportunity to basically save everyone from the respective situations. And it's like, Sabrina, how do you know what you know? It's like, well, I don't. And like I said, Zelda resurrecting Hilda and her being so like, I don't know. I just thought that was, like I said, it was just that beautiful element, because you almost see her being devastated. It's like, please, sister, come back to us, Oh my God, I completely forgot to talk about the fact is, like, the witches they ended up getting to help them. I would have never expected we see Gryla again. We have literally not seen her since, like, it was the Christmas special, but it technically counts as episode 11 of season 1. But we haven't seen her since then. I was like, yo, I didn't expect us to run into Gryla again. That's really interesting. Her and Grismelda shows up, as well as some other witches that we aren't that familiar with. I don't think they'd ever, like Pesta, for example, like her kind of being basically, I guess, kind of similar to like one of the 4 horsemen, Pestilence, like her power to be able to kind of like destroy any green, and I like her being used as part of the plan. Can't even talk about it, because there was, like I said, there's so much I'm forgetting about, like that badass moment where Sabrina is like walking, and like the other witches are channeling their energy through her, because they were trying to capture Cersei at the time, to get everyone, like to get Dorcas and Roz back to human form again. And like as she's walking, she's saying each one of the witches' name to use their powers. I thought was pretty dope. But I did like the whole aspect of you, because it was like, oh, we knew that wasn't the real Harvey and everything, but I was wondering, I was like, oh, who they got? I was like, I thought it was Sabrina or something, but I was like, well, that's still a virgin, right? So I was like, wouldn't that still work or something? But I was like, oh no, it's Pestra. I was like, that makes sense. They made a whole point to show that. I was like, it should have clicked in my head that that's what that was about. I knew it had to be some trick. I just didn't know what it was. But obviously the Green Man was taken care of. Now it's literally the satanic witches versus all of them. And one by one, they all get taken down. Snake Lady gets taken down by Harvey and Roz. Once again, Harvey wanted to prove himself. It didn't work out for him, because Roz ended up coming to save the day. He should have left it to her. But once again, his need to kind of prove himself. Like, we'll see what kind of ends up becoming of that. But there's Cersei, which, yo, you had Hilda. Like, it's so interesting when you get to see Hilda go dark side. It happens every once in a while, in particular because she was pissed because it's like, because of you, Dr. C is dead, and started using that doll, and she's crumpling that woman like paper. It's like, ugh, doing it limb by limb, and then finally killing her. I was like, yo, hellbent Hilda is scary. And then finally, Pan ends up getting killed by Prudence because that was payback. She didn't find out about it later on, but obviously it's like, well, she knew Agatha got driven insane because of that, but they didn't find out about the Dorcas thing until later. Sabrina didn't know about that. Like, if Sabrina had known about that, maybe she could have gotten to Dorcas in time, but, well, by the time she showed up there, like, that whole thing had already gone down and happened, so there was no stopping that. But that killing Pan was more so for Prudence, because it was like, from my sister that you drove insane. But like I said, at the end, it does seem kind of like, okay, so there's kind of happy endings all around to a certain extent. But like I said, like, the fact is they set it up to make it seem like they lost. Like, you were wondering how they were going to handle that. I wasn't expecting a whole time travel angle, but I was like, I didn't know how they were going to undo that. But like, the fact is they set it up where we saw the loss, them lose. That was literally some Infinity War type of stuff. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But it seems like everything's kind of working out. Theo and Robin's planning to stay behind because he didn't believe in what his family believed in. Hadn't for a long time, because the way he was talking about he was adopted, I guess that was true. I don't think any of them were necessarily his family. I think somewhere along the way they found him and kind of brought him up, and so he subsequently got brought up with their beliefs. But eventually he didn't want to be a part of that anymore. Zelda and Mumbo Marie, that ended up being a thing. I thought that was interesting. I was like, okay. No, I just didn't expect that relationship to be a thing. But she talks about an even greater darkness is coming. It's like, well, because obviously, like, Lucifer kind of being like, no proper heir on the throne is kind of what led to the pagans coming now, because like Lucifer, I guess, kept so much at bay, with his power and influence, but him not being on the throne opened a pathway for not just him, but so much other stuff, some older gods, some things older than the older gods, that being a whole thing, that being the pagan stuff, but I'm sure even ancient stuff because of the whole thing with Blackwood, which we'll get to in a second. But obviously, all this ending kind of made me think, like, all right, we're going to get that thing that Zelda saw in her head. Like, obviously, like, she was an old lady holding on just long enough to see Sabrina. Sabrina's like, here, and it's like, I love you. You were like the best mother anyone could ever ask for, and then Zelda dies, and it's like, so either that's kind of insinuating that both Zelda and Hilda end up losing their witch stuff so that they can't that they stop aging, or maybe there's at a point in time when enough history's passed where they keep aging again. It's hard to say in that regard. I'm wondering if it's going to be the former where they actually start aging. We'll see. But my mind immediately was like, all right, we know that Sabrina's supposed to complete the loop. That must mean that, I was thinking like, okay, so she goes inside of the stone again, like replacing her future self, and what ends up happening, I was like, okay, so to complete the loop. So I was thinking, well, not the future self, she was supposed to go back, do it so that she could save herself and complete the loop and be trapped. And I thought by the time she got out, that scene from Zelda's mind would have transpired, like, because Sabrina was like, yeah, I'm probably not going to be back for a while. I don't know when I'm going to be back, aunties, but I love you type of thing. And I'm like, oh, she's going to be going for decades and she can't come back until then. And then Sabrina surprises me by doing what Sabrina does, always finding a loophole. Rather than going back and saving herself from that moment, she runs into herself before she met with Caliban and tells her, yo, this is what's happening. I don't understand everything either, but this is what's going down. The fact is, that's Caliban. That's not actually Judas. You give him the coins, he traps you. Fact of the matter is, we got this. The fact is, and it's like, oh, should we merge or something? Ambrose says we should, but I think I have another option. It's like, I think I do too. And they decide, oh, we're going to do this two ways. You get to, because you kind of want to rule hell and everything and enjoy the power, right? She's like, honestly, I kind of do. Is it weird? It's like, no, we want that power, but at the same time, I want to be able to be a teenager, because she saw, like, it's like, why not have both? Because she is torn between both lanes of, she does want that, but she also wants to be a teenager. I think her experiences, her being the more future, having experienced everything, made her decide, you know what, I'm going to make it so that we've lost so much. Like, we put the whole demon stuff before our family, and she saw what the outcome of that was. Not being there for her family and her friends, she saw what was the outcome. So Sabrina, because of that experience, is like, nope, I'm going to be the one that gets to be the teenager. But you're still fine with kind of aiming for the throne, so it can be yours. And they divide and conquer. Which we have Sabrina on the throne in hell and everything. And the Sabrina that we've been following, the one that time traveled, is back. She's with her family and everything. Ambrose catches on. It's like, what did you do? And it's like, well, I did choose the crown, but at the same time, I didn't. And it's like, okay. So now, and then he says to himself, you created a time paradox, which is like, it's fine. It's like, it's not fine. Sadly, once again, Sabrina being naive as she is, that's the number one rule in time travel. I mean, even if it's not the number one rule of time travel, it's definitely up there. Is don't create time paradoxes, because time paradoxes are what break the space-time continuum and lead to massive issues, which Ambrose is trying to get across, but Sabrina's not really listening, because once again, there's always consequences to what Sabrina does, because once again, that's who she is. She always tries to find technicalities around things because she thinks, once again, she can have it all, but her need to have everything might end up being hers as well as everyone else's undoing. Like her kind of pulling herself in so many different directions this season kind of led to a lot of stuff kind of falling apart. So the question, like, what does that mean going forward when there's literally two different hers? Like, obviously, because the sad thing is, this Sabrina probably would have been better at ruling the hell situation, because of this is the Sabrina who cherishes so much life, but it's like, so does that other Sabrina, but because the one that's in hell didn't experience what the one that's living the teenage life experienced, she might get consumed by that power. Like, absolute power corrupts absolutely and stuff like that. But that's why I'm wondering, like, that whole compassionate side of herself, she might let falter. She might let that power kind of get to her head, especially if she has their dad as well as Lilith whispering in her ear. But it's like, oh, Lucifer doesn't come here that often, so it's not like he's going to really know about it. And it's like, yeah, Lilith needs to be taken care of. Because Lilith did inform her, because she does know that she does have a brother now, so I'm wondering how that whole situation is going to pan out, especially you're keeping this a secret from Zelda and Hilda, but it's like, oh, they never go to hell, so they won't find out. They'll find out eventually. It's only a matter of time. They found out about you being Queen of Hell, didn't they? So, which the implications of this makes me think, because of what Zelda saw, the reason why I say I think that could still happen is, I think when it's all said and done, Sabrina's ultimately going to have to basically, it might be a thing of like, she has to basically undo everything that might happen in the next part. Like, for example, what I mean is, the fact is that she'll probably like do what she was supposed to do to kind of complete the time loop. And I was like, all right, here's that point in time. That's the thing. Now, because she created a time paradox, that time no longer exists. But that's the thing. Once again, it depends on the time travel rules. Does that timeline, like when a new timeline is created, does the original timeline stay or does it disappear? Once again, that's always something you have to keep in mind with these type of things. If it didn't disappear, she could technically, I guess, depending on the circumstances, jump back to that original timeline where she ends up getting trapped by Caliban. We'll see. I mean, he's stuck in stone right now. He's not dead, but he's in the stone. But he's kind of stone cold dead, as she was kind of implying. But it's like, oh, someone could always release him, but I don't see that happening. Her being Queen of Hell and everything. We'll see about that, My point was, I thought like maybe when it's all said and done, she still kind of goes back to that original path, kind of ends up undoing everything, and she ends up being locked away for decades, and then she eventually gets free, and lo and behold, there's everything with Zelda and Hilda from her dream with all those witches around as Zelda's about to, die. Which I guess would almost be, considering everything that went down, like I said, we don't get the full scope of that situation, but it's supposed to be like the beginning, middle, like kind of like the different stages in Hilda's life. Obviously when in Zelda's life, her and Hilda when they were younger. Well, more specifically, her and Faustus in the beginning, and then like when they got, her and Hilda got Sabrina, and then Hilda and Sabrina like at the end of Zelda's life. So like I said, depending on whether or not that's changed because of the timeline, because we might still get there, just different circumstances lead us there. Or like I said, she's locked away for those decades until someone frees her, and then she's able to kind of be with her. We'll see. I don't know what to kind of really make of that, because it's so interesting, because I think it might be a thing of we still managed to get there anyway, because what that future Sabrina who freed our Sabrina, the one that we're following, the one who went through everything, that future Sabrina, that furthest future Sabrina, she went through probably all of this. Like I said, whatever goes down potentially in part 4, she experienced all that. She went through all of that, and obviously she didn't want to change everything because like everything needed to happen. She needed to experience all that happened. So when it's all said and done, when she gets eventually unfrozen, or whenever the cycle kind of completes itself, it's probably a thing of Sabrina having to be like, all right, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna go be there with my family now. After everything, she'll be the only one that remembers the full scope of everything that went down. Like I said, this season 3 finale where they're waiting for her, like that timeline will continue on and eventually get to where Zelda was. Like I said, I'm probably confusing. The way I'm going about talking about this is very confusing. I know. I do apologize. I'm not very elegant and kind of putting this the way I want to, but that's where my mindset is. Like I said, that could always end up changing. And then there's everything with Faustus at the end. Whatever he releases, not only meant to be the end of the experiments, but it's meant to be the end of everything, which is some kind of creature he released, maybe like an ancient evil, ancient god. I'm assuming this is what Mamba was talking about. Maybe, maybe not. I'm curious to see where Faustus and Agatha, as well as Judas and Judith, like what their story is going to be potentially going forward, like what role, because obviously they were meant to be sacrifices, but was he really going to sacrifice his children? I don't know. To get what he needed. I mean, he ended up getting it anyway. Maybe he never planned to sacrifice his kids, but maybe they still play a role in whatever it is going forward. He originally had a plan for like basically making the twins get together. That was his plan last season. I don't know if he still plans on doing that for any shape or form. Like I said, Faustus isn't in the sanest of mind. Let's not also forget he's still got the mark and everything, being got the mark of Cain, so he can't be killed. Like I said, that's something to deal with. But like I brought up too, there's also the Nikki and Prudence thing. Things didn't work out for them this season. They lost a lot. Like I said, Nikki's got a lot he ultimately needs to be dealing with, but maybe something between him and Prudence, we'll see, because both of them kind of walked away from this season very broken and not all right, so maybe, and I forgot what show it was I'm currently watching where it's like someone broken, I think it's Lincoln Rhyme, regardless, like someone broken being able to help someone else who's, broken type of situation, so maybe something will come about that. Like I said, we'll ultimately have to wait and see. Chilling Adventures of Sabrina is coming back for a part 4. I might have mentioned this when during part 2. I don't remember. But I do remember reading something that had said that Netflix had already renewed it for part 3 and 4. Well, it seems like basically, because this season is obviously shorter. It's only 8 episodes in comparison to season 1 being 11 because of the Christmas special, and then season 2 being 9. It would have been an even like 10 split across both. You get what I'm trying to say. Regardless, the fact of the matter is it seems like they split part 3 and 4. So this is going to be 8, and while part 4 is going to be 8. And with what Faustus says, and just in the grand scheme of things, it definitely seems like part 4 would be potentially the final part. I could definitely see them setting this up for a finale. But once again, however long they want to go about this, I'm totally fine with. But the way things are kind of set up, I kind of feel like we are heading towards an end. But so rather than it kind of being, it's part 3 and part 4, but it's probably more so, if you want to put it like, Teen Wolf or Breaking Bad way, it's probably, it's like, part 3A and part 3B, but it's more than anything, it is just going to be part 3 and part 4. But I think that's definitely going to be interesting to see where all this ends up taking us in part 4, because it might be a thing of like part 3 and 4 probably were filmed around the same time, because it might be a thing that the entire season was filmed, but it's being split into a 3 and 4. Maybe not. Like I said, I haven't read too much into it. I just read that information, and because that's the only information I really need. I don't want to know any details about next season until next season comes around. So, but I'm very excited to see where all this ends up taking us into part 4. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.